What is up, folks? Kevin here. Hello, I hope you're doing well. Thank you so much for spending a small part of your day with me today on this recording. I really do appreciate your time, and I do hope you can get some value for what I have for you today. So let's just jump straight into this thing. My name is Kevin Wolstenholme. I am CEO and founder of RisingHigh Apps. We are a 12-time Apple featured studio, 7 times published with Absolute Games, and 5 times under our own label. My partner in crime is Jilly, and Jilly will look after the level design and the game design, and together we run the studio here. So today we're going to go through our 10-stage formula of creating a feature-worthy game. Now, why is this important to you? Well, there's a couple of reasons. One, if you're looking to get a publishing deal, you're going to want to see this. And number 2, you might know the numbers 4.2.6. Now, if you don't, 4.2.6 is a new Apple guideline regarding commercially bought templates. Apple has closed the door on the source codes. You are going to be very lucky to get any commercially bought template through the review system. They are cleaning up the store, accounts are being closed. It's time to up your game, and I'm here to show you how we do it. This should last about 30 minutes or so. We're going to blast straight through this. I'm going to go fast. Get your pens ready. Here we go. Alrighty then, so let's get this thing rolling and start off at number 1, which is our market research. What game should I make and where do I even start? These are great questions and we get asked this all the time. So for us, what we like to do is to visit the top 100 games category, both free and paid, and we will start to look around for games that have stuck around and stood the test of time. Now, this is a great jump off point, and we can see from these which game mechanics seem popular and which ones have done well in terms of their consistent chart ranking, and again, what is the public and the market liking. We can also dive into the subcategories here on the App Store itself. We're looking for arcade and action and kind of puzzle, which fits in with the games that we make. And we can see from these subcategories the casual style games that do really well on the App Store themselves. From these games that we can see, we will take the ones we like the look of, and we will look into the reviews and try and data mine those reviews for information that we can use to move ourselves forward and think about when we're looking to build our new game. These can be things such as, I love this game but it needs more characters, or I love this game but it's way too hard. And these are the sort of seeds and the sort of impressions that we can build upon when thinking about a new idea for our game. It gets that in the back of the mind just to keep that idea that we could create something similar and yet we can improve upon what's already there. So the App Store really is the number one place for us to validate any ideas when we're starting out. We can see what the market likes, and we can build upon any ideas and any games that we see in there that we know have got something already and are already popular. Now, aside from the App Store itself, we also like to look at game jam videos. Now, if you're not familiar with a game jam is a group of creatives coming together, usually consisting of programmers, game designers, artists, sound guys, all pulling together to create one or more little games over a really short period of time. This will usually be a weekend, anything between 24 and 72 hours. And although the games that are produced here are really rough prototypes, they do create some really interesting and unusual ideas. Along the same lines as the game jam videos, there's also online gaming sites that we like to take a look at. These can be some of the old Flash-based arcade sites, which often have hundreds if not thousands of small little mini games. And sites like itch.io and GameJolt can often hold some really interesting mechanics and unusual game types that you don't regularly see. Now, whilst again these will not be fully fledged games, it's something where you can draw inspiration from and something that perhaps you won't normally see within the App Store itself. And that leads us on to number 2, which is one of my favourites, and we're calling that Game Fusion. So what is Game Fusion? Well, based off the market research that we've just done, we would have identified 2 or more popular games with a proven model and try and fuse and forge those 2 mechanics together to create a brand new game. So this can manifest itself in many different forms, and we've seen this over the last few years in the match 3 genre especially. We can see that they've got the existing match 3 game, but they will add, say, an RPG element to it, or perhaps a building element to it. In some cases you'll even see a fighting element at the top of the screen on many match 3 games. Now, using this game fusion technique, we can use this for our casual games quite effectively, and in fact we've done that in many of our games that we've made ourselves. An obvious example for our games would be our game Fatal, where we added a shoot 'em up space invader element to what is a high score chaser. It worked really well in this game to break it up, and this is a perfect example of this game fusion coming together. So when you're coming up with your own game ideas, think about how you can use this technique to your best advantage. This can work especially well if you're looking to get published. You can jump onto the App Store and check out that publisher's game portfolio, see which ones have performed best, and take the game mechanics of those games, if not all of it but certain elements, to try and merge them together into something new. There aren't any hard and fast rules to follow here, and it's really without constraints. You could take, say, a high score chaser and turn that into a level based game, or even add mini games inside what would be your main mechanic to mix things up and add bonus levels and things of that nature. This is a surefire way of setting yourself apart again and really creating something unique to you. It's highly recommended that you adopt this and have fun with it, see where it takes you. It's what we do, we love it, and we highly recommend you want to adopt this game fusion technique. So let's move on to number 3 now, which is the prototype and building, which is probably one of the most exciting stages of the projects for us here. So we like to approach this the old school way with a sketchbook and a pencil, and we will sit down for anything between 10 minutes and a few hours scribbling away our ideas, really letting those creative juices flow and just record all the ideas that we have at that moment in time. Now, of course, this will adapt and evolve over the process of the project, but these main sketches are really great to revert back to, certainly when we're getting a little bit thin on the ground for ideas. Our main goal here is to jump in our software of choice and get that prototype moving as fast as possible. So if you've come across this before, you're probably aware that we use BuildBox to develop. It's an absolutely awesome tool and we love it. It especially comes into its own at this prototyping stage, where we can deploy it really fast and get something moving around the screen, and we can get something we can play. Now, it's really important, and I cannot stress this enough, that with all the research and all the sketching that we do, the most important part of the project really hinges around this prototyping stage, where we can really validate our idea and see if it's going to work or not. For us, the timescale of the prototyping can be anything from a day up until a good few weeks. It really does depend on exactly what happens as we're building this thing out. We have a really organic process of building our games, and this is never more prevalent than in the prototyping stage. Often when we're trying to do something, we'll either delete an object or do something wrong that will make something weird and wonderful happen, and we really embrace this change and run with it. To a certain degree, we'll let the project lead its own way here. Our goal is to get that mechanic in and get a build on our phones as soon as possible. One of the important things about the prototyping stage of the project is to be excited about the game, to have those ideas flowing in abundance, and if you're not excited at this stage, you probably want to consider working on something else, because when the tough times happen, you'll want to have that energy to dig deep and finish things through. This is a point also where we start to look at putting some social teasers out on social media and letting people know what we're doing. We won't have a lot to show at this point, but this is where we like to sort of announce that we're building a new game and just try and generate a little bit of interest. It's a pretty tough gig on social media to get any kind of attention, so the sooner you start the better, and it's at this prototyping stage that we will start to do this. Try and be as consistent as possible when posting on social. People live their lives in weekly cycles, so try and make it the same day every week at least that you're posting new stuff and the progress of your game. A really nice byproduct of doing this is that you keep yourself accountable and on track for the week's progress, and any interest you can gather now, you might end up with some really good fans, and often we'll get really nice suggestions too, so don't be afraid to share. Your enemy is not other developers, your enemy is attention, so it's always a good idea to try and share it as early as you can. So now we're going to move on to number 4, which is our art direction, and for this we're going to turn our attention back to the App Store itself, and over the weeks of our project we're going to be keeping a keen eye on what games are being featured by Apple. Whilst art style alone will never guarantee you a feature spot, there are certain styles that the App Store editors are drawn to consistently, and we can use those to our advantage. So the first one is the flat style, and you'll all have seen these games. It's really popular within the casual game market, one that we use time and time again. And for the non-graphic people out there, this is a really good way to execute well on your game. So often you won't need to hire an artist for this. You can do the basic shapes in Pixelmator or some sort of other free or cheap graphic software. You can't really go far wrong building a square. So I'd highly recommend you keep this on your radar. It's certainly one of the easiest to execute on, and is still super popular today. Next up will be the voxel style that rose to fame through Crossy Road. There's been countless hit games and many featured games adopting the voxel style. It's a real fun look, great for games with lots of characters, and definitely one you should consider. Then there's a polygon style, and if you're not familiar with that term, you've almost certainly seen these games. This is a personal favourite of mine. I really enjoy this art style. I think it's a really clever way to get a really nice stylish look for your game, and you'll certainly be able to get attention using this if executed well. And the last one we mentioned, but by no means least, is the pixel art style. Now this is one of Apple's favourite styles of artwork. You will see a pixel game being featured almost every single week, and you'll certainly see really top quality pixel games getting the banner features and the editor's choices. Now this is a real skill to make. You can't just make your normal artwork pixely. It doesn't quite work like that, so this is a real skill in of itself, but if you've got some talented team behind you and you can create a great pixel game, I would do this all day long. So those are just some of the art styles that we see being featured week in, week out, and by no means does your game have to follow any of those styles, but just to be mindful that it's not a bad place to start if you're looking to be featured or get with one of the bigger publishers on the store. One thing to really consider when choosing the art style is the match between your art style and the gameplay. It needs to be a good fit for the game itself, so if you're doing a cutesy platformer game, make sure that your artwork reflects that to show the demographic of the younger player. And similarly, if you're doing a hardcore beat 'em up, pink neon cats might not be the good way to go on that. The most important thing here is not to scrimp and save on your artwork. The market will demand a high quality finish, and certainly if you're going after that publishing deal, they will look for the same. If there was ever a place to put your budget, we would recommend putting it into your artwork. So here we are, number 5, we are halfway through, and this is the game building section, one of the most critical parts of any game and the meat and potatoes of what we do here. This is all about the level design and the game direction. When we talk about level design, it's a vast subject, and this will differ from game to game, and of course it will differ from the style of game that we're building. An endless game is far easier to build than a level-based system game, due to the fact that we can randomise those levels and it's generally a lot less work. This is where, as a game designer, building worlds and designing levels is the most rewarding thing we can do. But it can also be a massive frustration too, especially at the end of the project. So this is where we need to keep adding those surprises, adding those fun elements, introducing new characters or power-ups or enemies to keep that game alive and keep the interest there for the player. So at this stage of the project, we'll usually decide on how big our game is going to be. If it's an endless game, we'll decide on how many scenes that it will take to make the game random enough for the player. Or if it's a level-based game, we'll probably end up on around 50 levels, but this will depend, of course, on how big the game is and how long the levels are. So we'll also take a look at adding any characters at this stage. We'll certainly discuss how many, if we are, and although this will generally change throughout the rest of the build cycle, most of the decisions and the pegs in the ground are set at this point. It probably will not come as any surprise that this is the longest part of the process by far. It is really the core of the whole game itself, and this is where we will put our most energy in. So as I mentioned before, we do have a really organic process to building our games, but I've listed a few things for you to consider here when building your games, and a really good guideline to follow. So first up is the core loop, and this will be what your player will do over and over within your game. A simple core loop could be something like play the game, earn some coins, upgrade your character or unlock a new world. For casual mobile games, it should really be short and simple in essence, and the shorter the gameplay is usually better for the mobile market. Next up is the mechanics, and this is how your player will move and react with the environment of your game. What are the controls? One tap, left and right on the screen, joypad. All of these things need to be decided at this game design stage. Rules. What are the actual rules of your game? Are these simple enough to pick up and understand? Are the enemies consistent in colour? Is it obvious that they're going to kill you or shoot you? Again, these need to be considered and obvious for your player to enjoy your game the most they can. The environment is much the same as the last point, and is it clear that if you hit that spike you'll die? Is it the same colour as the background? Will you notice it? Making things easy like this and consistent throughout your game is critical to the success. Goals, and what is the point of the game itself? Is it compelling enough to see the players return time and time again, keep them engaged and want more? Rewards. What rewards does the player have by completing a certain task? Rewarding your players generously early on is usually a really great tactic to keep them playing and coming back. Get them really involved early on and hook them in. Challenge and difficulty. How hard is your game? This is all about a balancing act, and if it's too hard you'll lose them early on. And if it's too easy, it will most likely become boring really fast. So these things are really important to consider when building out your game. Decision making. What makes the player think? Now, this is at the heart of all puzzle games, but for casual games we see this too, and all games in fact. So how do I jump on that platform to collect that coin? How do I get past that bit? Again, these are the sort of deliberations you need to consider, and it will be crucial to how well your game does. So that's just a few points there. There's plenty more that goes into that, but hopefully that you'll get something out of that and that'll help you as you're building your games. Alrighty then, so we are on to number 6, and this is the user experience. Now, ignore this at your peril. This is your onboarding and your tutorials. Now, for many casual games, we do not need like a 3-hour tutorial on how to play. Most of the time it's pretty obvious with simple controls, but getting your onboarding right here when your player first enters your game is pretty critical to make sure they're not confused and there's a clear path of what they should do. So we like to look at this as the player's journey and how they will interact with our game and how we guide them along through the various screens that we'll present to them. So this will always depend on how complicated your game is. You want to make sure that your players are fully aware of everything that's going on before they really start the game. This can be as simple as a little thumb tap in to show the player how to play. It could be a short pop-up box or a series of pop-up boxes just explaining the rules of the game before they actually get into it. And the last thing you want to do is have your players scratching their head, figuring out what the heck they've got to do here, as that will usually result in an uninstall pretty fast. The other thing to consider about the user experience is the reward system that you put in place and how you display the rewards of that. So it's really nice when you complete a level in a game, you have some kind of celebratory display or sound. Ensure that they are suitably smiling when they actually achieve one of their goals and rewarded with goods and coins and things of that nature. This really does elevate your game to the next level, and it will really make the player want to come back again and have that feeling that they've achieved something and they're rewarded justly for that achievement. So that's a brief overview of the user experience and journey that we like to consider when we're building our games. This should flow throughout your entire game from start to finish, from the very moment they open your game up to the moment they complete it. Okay, so that moves us on to number 7, one that is closely entwined with the user experience, and that is the UI and the monetization. So how will my player navigate through my game? How will I monetize and make some money? So let's start with the UI straight away, and obviously we're talking about mobile here. So the most successful UIs for mobile are very simple and minimal design. Clearly for some games this will be more tricky than others, as there will be a lot of options and a lot of things to do within your game. So if you can minimise the amount of stuff at any given time that isn't crucial for the player to move along, then it's often a good idea to do something like that. This is definitely the approach that we take when building out our UI, and we will spend a good amount of time on this, and it will go through various iterations throughout this process. Again, there's no real hard and fast rules here. Each UI will be bespoke to that game itself, and although there's a few staples like the leaderboard buttons, the sharing buttons, things like that that will appear on all our games, each one will be designed around the game itself to cater for what's inside, be it levels, characters, things like that. So let's move on to the monetization side of things, and for our casual free mobile games we rely heavily on ads to monetize, and although we're at number 7 on the list, we do think about the monetization pretty much straight away when we're beginning the game, and we will try and bake this into the core of the game itself. So we're huge fans of rewarded videos, and we'll be working out exactly how we can get players to watch a video for something free within the game pretty much straight away. We also like to use interstitials, but we're not particularly aggressive with these. We would normally do these every 5 to 6 game overs. This will depend on the difficulty and the session time of the game we're building. The shorter session with the higher death rate, we will usually put this up to 7 or 8, not to annoy the player. We do want to make money, but we also don't want to annoy the players so much they delete the game. Now, we've often used banners in the past. I'm not a huge fan of banners, but they do work really well for us. I think depending on your game, certainly a portrait game that moves up, the banners can be pretty unintrusive and can be a really significant part of your revenue. When it comes to the in-app purchase side of things, you always want to be including at least one of these in your games. This could be a simple remove ads, but make sure you've got an in-app purchase of some kind into your game. Now you can also add an in-app purchase for unlocking characters, unlocking levels, unlocking worlds. All of these are really good methods of doing this, and Apple is focusing more on promoting in-app purchases in the coming new store, so be mindful of this and get them in there, and you never know what can happen. Alrighty then, so we are on to number 8, which is the final polish, and this is where we start to ensure that our game is absolutely bug free, making sure that all the UI is lined up correctly, making sure that the player is not cheated at any point in the game. It's also the point where we'll invite our test flight and beta testers to get in there and make sure that everything's looking okay for us. It's all about the play testing, the play testing, the play testing, the play testing. No, I wasn't stuck. This is all about the play testing. We have got to play and play and play our game. We make sure that everything is where it should be. This is the real crunch part of the project, and you should be absolutely sick to death of your game by the time you finish this stage. So I've just mentioned test flight and beta testers, and you may be surprised it's a little bit late in the day to invite people to test our game. But in all transparency, we may well do this a little bit earlier, but certainly we will only have normally 2 rounds of beta testing for our casual games. There's not an awful lot that can go drastically wrong, and what we don't want is to have our testers telling us stuff that we already know is broken. So whilst it is important to get early feedback for your game, it's at this point for us that the real beta testing begins, because this should be picking up stuff that we probably missed. The final polishing stage of any project is usually one of the hardest parts of the project. Energy is generally pretty low, and you should be sick to death of playtesting your game over and over again. It's super important not to skimp on this stage. It's what all your hard work has been about over the weeks that you've been building your game. So dig deep, find that energy, and finish the game off with the polish it deserves. And that leads us on to number 9, which is our marketing suite. So the marketing suite is icons, screenshots, app preview videos, a press kit, website, all that good stuff. So let's start off with the icon, and our goal for the icon is to keep it super simple and really clean. We want it to reflect the very essence of our game, and we always use a very limited colour palette, usually no more than 3 colours. For screenshots, again depending on the game type, we may or may not include some marketing text on these, but if we do, they should be limited to no more than 5 words on each screenshot for the games. We look to include mostly action shots, and we're really looking for the most impressive moments in our games, be it explosions, crashes, things like that. Variety is really the key here, so if there's different characters or different worlds within our game, we'll always try and highlight those to give us a good mix and spread of colours. So for our app preview videos, we make these ourselves and we use a gameplay with music technique, and it's Camtasia is our software of choice for the editing. We'll get straight into the action on these, and much like our screenshots, include the most interesting moments to show off in our game. We use as many cutscenes as we can and ensure the music that we choose to go along with the video fits well with the overall mood of the game. This is really important so there's no mismatch at this point. So when it comes to your press kit and your website, we don't actually create a press kit for our games at this point, but when we initially pitched Apple when we were starting out, we did, and we also created a dedicated website for the game, and we know that they visited both. So for us now, we only create a games page and that will live on our main company site, but if you're pitching Apple for the first time, I'd recommend you doing so to really give that extra little bit of effort to put in at this point, and if you feel your game has got the X factor, it's probably worth a day or so to set this up just to give you a real good advantage. Alrighty then, so we have made it all the way to number 10, and this is our launch calendar. So at this point we have our game uploaded, submitted and approved by Apple, and we are good to go at a moment's notice. So around 3 weeks out we will then send our pitch email to Apple, and we will also at this point try and send some emails out to the press and get coverage for our game. Getting press for your game is a real tough gig. Competition is pretty fierce out there, but if you do manage to secure an article on one of the bigger gaming sites, Apple will certainly love to see this. We'll also try and get rid of all the free promo codes that were offered once our game is submitted and approved by Apple, and we'll try and distribute these out to journalists and sites and YouTubers just to try and drum up a little bit of anticipation. We'll also be sharing screenshots and videos on our social channels, but it's important to remember here that you don't want to run out of content before the launch date itself. So we'll hold back until about 10 days before the launch date, and then we'll start ramping it up, posting pretty much every day up until the day we go live. But we actually release UK time on a Wednesday just to make sure we hit all the stores in good time and clear up any bugs that might just have crept in that we've missed. So the Thursday comes around and it's the official launch date of the game. We will then hit refresh about 3 million times on the App Store to see if we made a place in new games we love. Luckily for us, we've never not been featured since we set up our studio, so we have 12 out of 12 now. But yeah, it's a pretty tense day, and all that work comes to fruition on that Thursday. So there you have it folks, there's our 10-stage formula to create a feature-worthy game. I hope you got some value out of that. I know we went pretty fast, there was an awful lot to cover. And if you're passionate about this stuff like us, or you think it'd be super cool to have a place where you can hang out and deep dive into all these stages, then I'd love to invite you today to join us inside the RisingHigh Academy. You'll connect with like-minded game makers from all over the planet, and I'd love to show you a little bit of what we've got inside now. So here we are at the dashboard, and let's take a look around of what's in store. We can enter our course library where you'll find our Platinum Standard Foundation course, over 2.5 hours of HD video training, 5 modules, 54 masterclass topics, covering everything from getting ideas to finding publishers and pitching Apple. The entire course is transcribed on the website and includes our press kit templates, social media templates, the 2017 Top Mobile Publishers PDF, forum post template, media pitch template, app launch calendar. It's all in there, and we're really proud of our flagship product. So next up we have season 1 of the Watchers Build series, and this is our biggest, if not the biggest case study ever created documenting an Apple featured game. So this is where you'll come behind the scenes and follow us as we create our latest game, Glide. It is literally over the shoulder, and you will watch us when we start off with a blank screen, right through to creating the concepts, how we built it, right through to the launch day on iOS. We've laid down over 50 hours of video here. It is the most comprehensive case study I've ever seen. We include the market research, graphic design, UI design, Monetisation, localization of the screenshots, level design, app preview creation in Camtasia, screenshot creation, building the icon, pitching out to the press, and of course pitching Apple. Existing Academy members absolutely love this. There is so much detail and information in here, it will blow your head off. Up next is our weekly live Q&A sessions, and this is where each Friday we will host an hour live Q&A call where you have the opportunity to come on and ask us any questions that you may have. These are really relaxed and informal and a lot of fun, and our goal is to get you past any struggles that you may be facing that week. We've also included all the past live streams so you can go back through these. They're full of information and packed with really great content. And if you can't make it live, we'll still answer your questions and they'll be available in your dashboard within 48 hours. So next up we have the Academy community, and this is where you get to hang out with all your fellow game designers, game developers and game producers, and it's a really supportive network we're building here. We hang out in there too, so you can ask any questions you may have to us. We have an absolute zero acceptance of any trolling or negativity. This really isn't the place for that. This is full of smart people helping each other and having some fun. Honestly, this is where the real magic happens. There's some expert conversations in here. This will be a support for you along your journey, and we will help you get where you want to go. We have our resources section where we're adding to all the time, and you'll find some really cool stuff in here too. We have interviews with the likes of Simon Crack of Dead Cool Apps, a 14-time featured developer. My good buddy David Zibberfane, CEO of Absolute Games, one of the biggest publishers on the planet, sits down with me and I grill him about how to get featured and how to get published. And of course we have David Reichelt of Colour Switch fame. I sit down with David and chat about gaming and how he builds his games and all that good stuff. So this is very much a living, breathing academy. We will be adding new content every month, staying on top of the trends and all the news within the app space. Anything that we can do to help you along building your games, we're here for you. So that just about wraps things up from me. We'd love to see you inside the Academy and help you along in your journey. You can scroll down below and choose one of the buttons. And yeah, thanks for taking the time out of your busy day to spend with me today. And yeah, we will catch you on the inside.